First of all, again, welcome to everyone who is taking the time out of their schedule to brave the rain, to come out to an interesting discussion. I hope you'll come away from this fully enlightened and encouraged about cultural intelligence. If we look at the business world today, do we think the business world has changed in the way it conducts its international dealings? Do we find a change in how businesses, maybe today versus 20 years ago, conducts itself internationally?
A little bit about my background. I used to work for the Walt Disney Company, which is the quintessential American firm. And to answer that question, I would say yes, and then I'm going to have a few caveats on that. But, and you all know the Disney Company and some of the challenges they had with moving internationally and learn from those lessons. So I do think that, you know, I've been in Asia for over 25 years now. I do think that there's more cultural intelligence, more teaching of it, there's more awareness of it. So that what I found, though, is I think we forget the systems inside organizations. So we forget recruitment, words such as, are you ambitious and are you a leader? Those don't necessarily work in different cultures, right? We also forget, we have leadership competency frameworks that originate from typically America, and we use those same frameworks to evaluate leadership across Asia. So I think there's an awareness of the individual, more of an awareness. I do think there's mindfulness, but I think from an organizational perspective, we sometimes miss that systems approach, and ergo, all this talk of I can't find talent, my argument is it's because you're not seeing the talent that's sitting right in front of you. You're seeing it from a very North American viewpoint.
Subarna, do you feel the same?
Sort of.
Okay.
But I think when you look at from a multinational like MNC's perspective, you know, I think for a long time, MNCs, particularly from companies from the West, they are struggling or they have a dilemma in their hand, basically because they want to, you know, they know that Asia is a growing market. They are investing a lot of money in Asia. But when it comes to recruiting talent or retaining talent, and keeping the talent in, you know, in their organizations, they have a hard time. Especially what Jane talked about in terms of recruitment. You know, you still have multinational companies here run by, you know, Westerners, and it's very hard for multinationals to really recruit Asian leaders because there is some stigma or there's unconscious bias that's going on. So I think there is that's one of the, you know, of course the business world is changing. Like I said, if you look at all of you know. The growth is here in China, India, Indonesia. Probably now we're talking about Myanmar as a next potential growth opportunities for a lot of the MNCs. But I think what Jane is saying in terms of mindset, in terms of getting leaders to really run the organization so that cultural competence is there, I don't see that happening as of now. There's some companies that are very progressive and things are happening, but most of the companies I see is still in that old Western tradition in their thinking, and then the cultural plays a huge part of it. I'll touch on that a little bit more later.
So even though the businesses are obviously focused on growing in Asia, you're saying that the practices are pretty much the same as they were. You don't see a change in that. Okay. Penny, do you see?
Can you all hear me? I agree with Subarna that there is an attempt to really increase cultural competence, but in the day-to-day, in business, the way it's conducted, I feel it's really quite slow. I'm a cross-cultural coach and trainer, and often I'm engaged when a business leader is either moving to Asia or Asian business leaders here moving to other places. And what I find often is that it's tied to relocation. and it doesn't, many times people talk about do's and don'ts, and they look at it very superficially. Some of the companies I work for, I train the senior executive, but also their spouses. And often they'll say, you know, I'm really busy right now. I don't have time for cultural training. I kind of know it. I've been to Singapore once or twice. I've been to China. And they don't even show up. And then if they do show up and they find out what we're really going to talk about, where we're going to talk about knowledge, which most training is about, but most people stop there. But the self-awareness, the biggest obstacle to doing business internationally is to see your own culture and to realize that's not universal. That is, you know, you do not see reality. You're wearing a lens or you're looking at your own map. And so many people that are so good in their own country just can't make that shift. I do employment assessments for international assignments. And I can tell within about 10 minutes if that person should even get on a plane. You know, they're so good in Sweden or Norway, but they cannot work in South Africa. So it's not just the leadership, but it's also the organizations as well. You know, why just develop leaders? Why not the teams as well? So often I find cultural competence is kind of like the gorilla in the corner of the room. Everyone knows there's a problem, but we all kind of pretend it's not there. And it is such an untapped resource. If more people would at least start to implement some of the knowledge and the behaviors, the self-awareness, I think it has a great impact. Let me give you an example of that. When I moved to Jakarta 25 years ago, I was a middle manager coming from Washington, D.C., and thought, okay, I'm just going to do exactly what I did when I was in D.C. And very soon, my team of 50 Indonesians and just living in Jakarta, I realized, no, I definitely have to add some new behaviors. Some of my behaviors are great in my skill set, but I have to add some more on. And I kind of arrived as Ms. Penny Morris-Hardee, and within about 6 months, my style had to be Ibu Penny. And completely shift, again, keeping the behaviors I had, but adding new ones so I could really work in Jakarta as opposed to the U.S. I also found that what I thought was universal in business, the way that I conducted, was way too American. And I had to learn that shift. And again, the knowledge transfer, I thought I was going to be bringing knowledge to the Indonesians, but in reality, they taught me so much about my Americanness, about my style, and also what works in Jakarta and what works in other places. So we have so much in common, but we do it in different ways, and that was something that I felt really helpful. This was really helpful. So as the business world changed, unfortunately, I don't think enough. That's why I think I'm going to be gainfully employed for a really long time. It's a very exciting field.
Andrea?
I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this, sort of more high level. As the business world changed, absolutely. And for me, globalization and technology are two macro trends that have most certainly changed the way that we do business. Taking globalization first, companies compete in an increasingly global world. Their potential customer base is global, the threat of competition is global, the potential talent pool is global. So it seems to me that any successful business leader, any successful business person would clearly benefit from more CQ. Why? You need CQ to understand your customers, you need CQ to understand your competition and how the competition works in the local market, and you need CQ to hire the best talent suited for a particular role. You need CQ to build teams that can work together. I was thinking about this, and you know, governments have for a long time used cultural intelligence when they conduct diplomacy. They successfully manage cross-cultural issues and conflicts. Businesses just sort of need to think the same way. When I told a colleague that I was coming to talk about this panel, they sort of laughed because I managed these two joint ventures. One was CIMB in Malaysia, and it's an Islamic joint venture, and the other was CCB in China, and it's a Chinese-based domestic joint venture. So, you know, basically it's CQ 101 when you're managing a joint venture. Technology. I think technology has changed the way that businesses conduct international dealings, and because of it, business leaders have no excuse not to be culturally aware. The internet enables a willing leader to at least reach out and try to learn something about a culture before they interact with a customer, or learn about who the local competitors are. And finally, technology has also changed the way that we search for talent. I mean, who hasn't used Facebook or LinkedIn to check out someone before you meet them? So you're more, sensitized to that whole environment. So to sum it up, I think globalization makes CQ a requirement, and technology may be a means to enhance CQ and maybe even flatten it a little bit more.